Export it to the cloud. I hope that works. All right. I don't know, should we get rolling here? We're now 2 minutes past the hour and I want to be respectful of people's time. Hey everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on redeployment during the pandemic. I'm Dave Camper, one of your business agents. My co-presenter today is Alex Erickson, who's on my left on my screen. I don't know where he is in your screen. Alex, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. Alex Erickson, organizing business agent here at MAPE. Thanks for joining us. This is obviously an important topic and something that a lot of people have questions on. So true to spirit, let's talk about it.
Great. Lena, do you want to give us a quick hello before we get rolling?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Lena Jamul, Executive Director. Just really want to lift up Alex Erickson and Dave Camper for putting this together. We found out about the redeployment efforts kind of almost at the same time as everyone else did last Tuesday, a day before the holiday, and within just a period of less than 48 hours, Dave and Alex had got their heads together, put this webinar on for all of you, and we sent out an FAQ to all members around it. So just kudos to the staff for working so quickly and diligently on this.
You bet. And also, of course, Mike Asmus is here, and Mike will be monitoring the chat for the group. We do encourage you to use the chat to put questions in. Alex and I are going to start a presentation here in a minute, but again, that's only going to probably be 10-15 minutes, and then the rest of it will be Q&A. So go ahead and throw the questions in the chat, and we can start a queue so we can make sure we address them. So I'm going to start a share screen here, which doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Can someone let me know if/when they can see it?
We can see it, Dave.
Excellent. And then I'm going to try starting the slideshow, and sometimes the slides will not advance when I do that. So we're at the first slide. Everyone sees that. Did I just advance the slide?
Home screen.
So no. Okay. So then I just have to. So I'm just going to have to. You'll still see the menu bar at the top and things here. We'll just have to be okay with that. You all can see this PowerPoint just fine, right? Good. All right. So quick agenda for what we're going to do here. We're going to talk a little bit about how we got here, the history of this, the policy, and what we know of their plans. At that point, I'll pass it to Alex, who's going to address the questions that we know we've already gotten and that we expect we'll get more of because they're the most common ones, in the hopes of anticipating what you're going to ask us. And then when he's done, we will open the floor for Q&A. As I said at the top of this is being recorded, so we will have it available for people who aren't able to stay the whole time or who couldn't attend. But we're glad you're all here to be with us today. So we got here because of the state of emergency that the governor declared in March, and especially Emergency Order 20-07, which is the one that effectively instructed the state, instructed MMB to take whatever measures were necessary in terms of deployment of state employees to protect the health and safety of Minnesotans. At that point in time, back in March, April, and May, there was a union coalition that was meeting twice a week with Minnesota Management and Budget. That's still a weekly meeting now. And when they rolled out the emergency administrative procedure on redeployment, which is fun to say 5 times fast, we were part of the process of understanding that and asked a lot of questions at that time that hopefully we will be able to address here as well. But the point I'm making here with this introduction is that we knew that redeployment was something that was happening. And in fact, a small number of employees have been redeployed throughout the pandemic. Some people who are nurses, for example, and others. This is the actual policy, and Mike, I just sent it to you on the email. So if you want to put it in the chat when you get it, this is the actual redeployment policy, which you are certainly welcome to read at your leisure. But part of the goal of the webinar today is so you don't have to read the whole thing on your own. You can get some help from us with it. Wanted to first be clear what we're talking about when we mean redeployment, because there are words that are similar to it that are not the same. Redeployment specifically means moving you to a different agency on a temporary basis to do work in that other agency while you are still officially employed by your normal or original or regular agency. And so that is what redeployment means. That's what we're talking about today, is moving of people to another agency. In this case, we're in the immediate circumstance, it's the Department of Health. When redeployment began, or when the concept began, one of the things that we were most concerned about then was, are they going to run out of corrections officers at the prison, and are we going to have to send people in to do that role, or into hospital settings? And there are, in fact, some reassignments within agencies to those places, but the redeployment we're talking about now is to the Department of Health for contact tracing. And since I just mentioned the term, let me distinguish between redeployment and reassignment. Reassignment is within the same agency. We're not going to talk a lot about reassignment today. If you have questions that you want to ask about it, you certainly can. But understand that what we're talking about today is redeployment, which is similar, but not the same. And the difference is, do you move to a different agency? The way this has functioned, it seems to be functioning so far as we can tell, is that agencies are being given a quota by MMB. Now, it seems like a few agencies like the Department of Corrections and maybe at least the Direct Care and Treatment section of the Department of Human Services are being exempted from this quota for what are fairly obvious reasons of they have their own staffing needs at this point. There is a centralized redeployment center that is taking all the names that come in from the agency, and then people are being called up as they are needed. The agencies are being asked to give about 400 to 500 names to MDH, but that does not mean that all of those people are going to be called up at the same time. In fact, we expect a staggered, delayed rollout. Melissa Wenzel, who some of you know, the former president of Local 301, she got her notice yesterday that she's being called up. But some people who are going to be redeployed might not know for a few weeks. And this is a rolling process as it goes forward. And I should stress here as we go into the presentation, this is one of these things where they're building the plane as they're flying it. We had this with COVID leave too, right? Where they don't necessarily know how this is going to work either. And so changes, sudden amendments to the process are likely to happen here as they kind of put this into practice. So do bear in mind that as we give this presentation today, that everything we say might be superseded by events, but we're going to give you the best information we have today on how it works. And so that's the backgrounds for how we got there. I'm now going to flip it over to Alex. And Alex, I don't think I can give you control of the PowerPoint, so just tell me when you want me to advance a slide for common questions.
Well, that's the headline. So next slide, and we'll start with some of the ones that we are pretty certain are going to come up and are important. Okay, so this was one of the first ones that we started hearing a lot of, is what if somebody doesn't want to be redeployed? The policy spells it out far better than I can, which is employees must accept a reassignment or redeployment unless they request and are granted an exception by their appointing authority. Refusal to perform the duties of a reassignment or redeployment without an approved exception may be subject to discipline up to and including discharge. And that is spelled out in the emergency order from March. So there's not really a lot of room for interpretation or vacillation on this question. It's considered a term and condition of your employment. If you are given a redeployment notice, the expectation from the employer is that you will comply with that request in the same way that, actually the employer has started to take a firmer stance on mask wearing, in facilities in the work site. When that first started coming out, when people were going back into the work site, and if people, weren't wearing a mask, the manager or supervisor would maybe sort of have a discussion. And again, this is few and far in between, but it's considered a term and condition of employment. The contract language is clear that the employer can do this, as well as the emergency order. So if you have a legitimate reason, why the redeployment assignment is not something that you would be able to complete, due to health or circumstance, please bring that up with your manager or supervisor, and make your case very clearly. You might want to be tagging in a steward, or somebody, or a business agent, somebody at MAPE, to sort of guide you through that process. And I would hope that if it's a real great reason why this is not something that you would be able to perform, that we would be able to get an accommodation or an exception to that redeployment. So that's the answer is pretty clear here. All right, next slide. Okay, what if somebody wants to volunteer? This actually has come up quite a bit as well, is talk to your manager or supervisor immediately, and they will definitely be forwarding your name on. Frankly, I'm sure that they would be very pleased, of course, because as we know, with this being a very, as Dave articulately explained, building the plane while we fly it, I'm sure that managers and supervisors would be very happy to sort of fulfill their agency edicts of getting as many names as possible. So if this is something that somebody might want to do, for who knows how long the time might be, but if it's something that you're willing and able to participate in, please let your chain of command know, and I'm sure that they'll forward your name on to the pool, for your availability. Okay, next slide. Work out of class rules, okay? So this is also something that's spelled out in the emergency order. Any other employees who are reassigned or redeployed during the peacetime emergency will continue to be paid their normal rate of pay unless the reassigned or redeployed employee qualifies for a work out of class assignment as defined in Administrative Procedure 17 and as modified by this policy, the emergency order. So when we share out this PowerPoint, you'll be able to see the full Administrative Procedure 17.1. That is the 5-pager explicitly on the state's work out of class rules. But I think that the important principle for you to take as leaders and to share out would probably be that you're always going to be getting paid your normal rate. And then there is language in the emergency order about what it would take to do work out of class, which is classically substantially all of the greater class's duties, right? Which when we get into what this type of work is going to be looking like and doing contact tracing, becomes murky, I would say. But that is something that we could probably be doing on a case-by-case basis. And when people look at the position descriptions and sort of get seated, that again, as always, talk to a steward, talk to a business agent, talk to some other folks. If you think that work out of class applies and that you should be getting a higher rate, than what your normal rate is, there is language in the emergency order that covers that. So work out of class rules certainly do apply to redeployment. That's the answer, as spelled out in the emergency order. All right, next slide. Okay, is it on-site or telework? So we've been told enough times to believe that this is certain, right? That all the contact tracing is going to be telework. It's going to be done at home. People use their phones, laptops, and do the work at home. They've been very clear that this is not going to be, in-site work. So I think at this point we can sort of take that to the bank. And at the risk of muddying the waters a slight bit, and I know we said we weren't going to talk tremendously about reassignment, but what we have seen are some requests for reassignment into, which is of course within your agency, to go to a long-term care facility. We haven't seen, people being ordered to do so, but it's the same sort of policy of creating a pool and creating people that might have interest. Again, if you're a certified healthcare professional and you have some of the skills, of course, that our long-term care facilities would be looking for, please let your manager or supervisor know. And I'm sure that they would be, more than happy to accommodate that. But for the purposes of redeployment, and what we know, and the great majority of this effort is going to be contact tracing, and it's going to be telework. we've heard it enough times to believe that that is certainly the case. All right, next slide. Okay, another fun one where we do get murkier, right? Which is, if somebody is redeployed, how long will it last? I don't know. Nobody knows. MMB doesn't know. As we like to say in our parlance, any answer at this point is mere conjecture, right? But, you know, with 2 efficacious vaccines around the corner, I do think that things are going to be getting quite bad. You know, I think everybody in this room and in this group can handle the truth that we're going to be having some very bad outcomes. You know, in the next couple of weeks, things are going to continue to get bad. You know, so that there will certainly be a need, I would say, through the end of this year, you know, and certainly into 2021 in some capacity. When we start getting into the springtime, 2021, again, mere conjecture, but I anticipate the need for contact tracing to hopefully, as cases go down, the need, of course, to be doing contact tracing on positive cases, especially if truly efficacious vaccines are starting to get out into the wild and the population, of course, that need will be lesser. But they've not given us any time frame. That's unlikely to happen, case by case basis, and you know, needs of the employer, needs of the state, needs of combating the pandemic. Okay, next slide. Where can I learn more? All right, well, I think we've put it in the chat, the emergency order. I can dig up the administrative procedure and make sure that that gets in there. That's that's the state's policy on work out of class. And then, as always, ongoing communication certainly between us as a union and you, the members, and everybody involved. That's how we've really gotten a lot of the answers on this. Of course, you know, there's a lot of people on this call who participated in the MMB and all labor check-ins. That's been a great source of information, and where we've frankly fleshed out a lot of the content and the answers, you know, because the emergency order does cover a lot of this content. But again, when we start getting into the weeds a little bit, that's when we have to ask directly. And again, hence the purpose of this webinar this afternoon. All right, that's what I think I have.
Outstanding. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to stop the screen share now. We will send out the PowerPoint when we're done here. And we'll move into the Q&A. I just want to say a couple of things before we get there. One, I think we should take a moment and really appreciate the MAPE members who are going to be stepping up in this set of circumstances. Contact tracing is a vital part of the infrastructure of pandemic fighting. And it is an honor for MAPE members to be stepping up and doing this. And indeed, as leaders on this call, if you know of a member who's being called into this and they're a sort of person who you think would have an interesting story, we'd love to know their story so we could profile it. As MAPE, we like to show off our members doing heroic work. And then I would also say that I think we should be grateful that the state is choosing to use state employees for this as opposed to outsourcing it. I know someone in Arizona who happens to be my sister, who has a job doing contact tracing for the Arizona Department of Health, but she's hired through a third-party contractor. And she is not a state employee, and she doesn't get state benefits or any of those other things. And so I, for one, am glad that it's state employees who are going to be doing this, A, because I know you're competent and capable, but B, because it's a good message that state employees can respond to all these emergencies. So we're now going to open up the floor to questions. It sure looks like the chat's pretty full. Mike, you've been monitoring. So why don't you kind of quarterback the questions out, and Alex and I will do the best we can to handle them. I love these webinars because I see names on these people who I don't normally see. There's Sarah Pasale from St. Cloud Tech. I haven't seen you in forever, but there you are. The only chance I get to meet members in person anymore is on these things. What you got, Mike?
So are people in the DOC being considered for redeployment? If not, can they volunteer for it?
So we've gotten slightly differing pieces of information here, but we think that DOC, Department of Corrections, not Commerce, we think that Department of Corrections is not being asked to contribute bodies to the general redeployment pool. However, if you would like to volunteer, you certainly should. I think it's pretty safe to say that if your job in the Department of Corrections is at a facility, a prison, they are not going to be interested in giving you up because they're going to think they need you there. But by all means, put your name forward for it. There's absolutely no reason not to put your name in the hopper. At the very least, it shows you to be an eager beaver. And a reminder here that you can go into self-service, and Alex and Mike and I are not experts at this because we don't have access to this, but you can go into self-service and put your skill set in there and put your, that kind of thing, so that they know what you've got available to share.
And then I can actually just grab a quick one that might subsume quite a few questions. I saw some questions about who's paying my salary. That'll still be your agency. Who's going to be managing you should be, you know, whoever you are assigned, you know, to be your manager, supervisor in your redeployment. You know, you won't be reporting to your normal frontline manager, supervisor, of course, who won't know anything about contact tracing or they'll be back wherever you came from, you know, so you'll be reporting to a new manager or supervisor, you know, again, temporary, you know, for the duration of the redeployment, you know, but they will be in charge of the normal functions of management, you know, as I understand the emergency order, you know, which will include, you know, counseling, training, you know, making sure that your timesheet is approved, you know, all those things. And the policy does spell out that is handled, you know, by the receiving agency, not pay, because then the state would have to rearrange all the state budgets and do a whole lot of swapping around. So that'll all stay the same. But I think that's a quick one that should cover a couple of the questions in there. And it's important to note, of course, that your rights under the contract remain, right? You know, you can still call in sick, you can still request vacation. You know, you still have, you know, the right to your annual performance review and your step increases and all these other things, you know, and, you know, all this other stuff doesn't go out the window, right? You know, the same rules apply, except for the very important one of the work that you're doing and where you're doing it for the time of the redeployment. So I think that is important to put out, since I saw a lot of questions that were about, I'd say, sort of the housekeeping of how things would function. So I think that should be a helpful answer to some questions I saw.
Alex, can you touch on how seniority will be affected?
Well, okay. So another question we had here was about who's being picked, right? Or who goes into this pool. And the answer is about the skills that people have identified. You know, that's part of the big impetus that the agencies all have said, you know, that I'm aware of, which is, you know, update your skills and in your education in the self-service portal, right? That was the impetus for that. And they have been, you know, using varying degrees of pressure to really encourage people to do that. So that is how. It's not respective of seniority. You know, so those rules, as people are familiar with, you know, that do have some bearing when it comes to layoffs. Of course, classically, inverse seniority by classification for layoffs, right? That's where the seniority piece comes in. Not the case for redeployment.
Will my position be held when I'm redeployed?
Well, I mean, yes, but I just want to kind of qualify a little bit. Yeah, yes, your position will be held. You will be able to go back to your job. There is no automatic guarantee that if you say I'm just going to pick Minute as an example. If you're an ITS3 in Minute at DHS, I'm just randomly grabbing one, and you get redeployed, that you will automatically be returned back to your exact same unit and project. But I will tell you, as a practical matter, of course you will, because it's not going to be that terribly long a time. And they're only moving people who they feel like they can spare that work. A couple of questions I've seen floating in is, well, can divisions or parts of agencies, you know, not redeploy people who they think they're essential? Yeah, the appointing authority determines what names get sent to the redeployment center. So your agency is going to make, and who knows how they're going to do it, and I think they're all going to do it differently. They're going to make a determination on which of our people can we spare and which ones absolutely are so essential in their current work that they cannot be moved. And if they've decided they can spare you, it stands to reason that they're going to hold that job for you. You certainly have a job in the classification and work condition and everything else, and pay and everything else being held for you. There is a tiny chance that you might find your specific work assignment slightly changed when you come back. As a practical matter, I think that's incredibly unlikely. I just don't think they will do that. But it's not like you are guaranteed employment in your work condition, in your location, in your full-time status or part-time status. You're not necessarily guaranteed the same exact duties, though practically that's how it's going to play out.
I know you touched on this in the presentation, but there's been a handful of questions in the chat about what if you don't think you can be redeployed? What do you do?
Alex?
Yeah, so I would say I saw a little bit about that. If this is what I always try to counsel on accommodation, which I think is a similar concept to this. Have documentation, come prepared with the best argument you can possibly make, and make that case persuasively, and your odds will be improving, right? If it's, look, I mean, if the argument is, hey, I don't want to do this, or this is, I've never done this before, or that's probably not going to hold water. The appointing authority, the agency, they're probably going to say, hey, look, nobody else has done this either. We see that you have the skill, you work, we'll say that your position is something where you deal with people quite often. There's a reasonable amount of time on the phone and or client, customer, patient, et cetera, contact. Again, I think this is just a likely scenario. We think that you can do that based on the skills that are presented in the self-service portal and based on what you do every day. So sorry, the answer is that you have to go. And that is less likely to be granted. I would say it's hard for me to put myself in management's shoes sometimes or think about how they would view these things. But I believe that a much more likely scenario for exemption, exception, et cetera, is that somebody has a medical condition, somebody does not have the tools, equipment, training necessary to sort of complete this mission. Then I think it's more likely that we have an argument. If not, probably not going to happen. And I certainly think that they will be sort of towing the line on sort of not allowing people to, quote, get out of redeployment, sort of, based on factors of I don't want to do it, or I'm nervous, or things like that. They're going to say no.
Can I split my time with redeployment and my current duties?
Can is always a fun word to use there, right? It's what's the employer going to allow. My guess is for contact tracing, they're going to want that to be what you're doing, and that they're going to be moving you full-time over there. If you want to make the case, certainly go ahead. I think it's unlikely. I think the nature of contact tracing as work is that they're probably going to want you focusing on that full-time when you're doing it, or at least up to your full-time level. So I think that's what's likely to happen.
How much notice are folks getting?
Very little. We've been seeing people, get calls, emails just this week. Dave, do you know what the turnaround time is for the report dates, or what the lag has been on notice versus, showing up or first day?
Well, someone who got a notice yesterday is told they're starting on November 30th. So that's less than 2 weeks. But it's more, I think it's unlikely to be like a 24-hour, but I think people might get as little as a week's notice. I think they're going to try to make it 2 weeks notice for as much as possible, is probably my guess. Again, they want this to be smooth too. So it's not smooth for anybody if you have to drop what you're doing in 24 hours and turn around. So I suspect they will try to give you at least a week, if not 2.
Do we know how many folks they've picked already?
We don't, but we will be getting updates on this. Lena and Mike are on those calls with MMB, and I think they're going to give updates on that on a regular basis. And so as we get information that's shareable, we'll send it on. At this point, we don't know exactly though.
What happens if we transition over and we're unsuccessful in the new position?
Then you're going to go back to your job. You're going to go back to your job. They're not going to, if you were to commit actual honest to God misconduct, like if you were to commit theft or assault somebody or misuse state computers to commit an act of crime, like they're going to fire you for that. But if you simply don't work out in the contact tracing role, they're just going to send you back to your job. There's no reason they're going to do anything different than that.
Right. And yes, and the counseling, progressive discipline, et cetera, track, based on the sort of this mission, right, don't really fit. So yes, I think that they would probably send you back pretty quickly rather than sort of deal with the rigmarole of performance improvement, performance management.
Indeed, I think it's probably worth noting here that there's probably going to be some very good state employees who just aren't going to be a fit for this role, who are going to get redeployed. And it's just going to turn out not to be something that's really going to work for them. And that's not, we should not treat that as a failure on that person's part or anything. It's probably just like some parts of this role might be difficult for some people to do, and that's okay, right? That's okay if not everyone is going to be fully successful at it. It's going to happen. So we just be prepared for it.
For the contact tracing, am I going to have to use my personal phone? And related, what if I don't have internet at home?
We are working on this. We got this question about the phones, I think, yesterday. It's a good question. And I don't know that we have an official answer yet. I will tell you my best guess is that contact tracing is a team sport, insofar as it's not just you, it's a whole team of people contact tracing. So they want to have a way for when someone gets called, they can call back and get a hold of somebody, not everybody. So I really think they're not going to use personal phones. They're probably going to hook you up to some system. Those of you who do political phone calls will know these systems where it all comes from a central place. That's only a guess, but it would be what makes most sense for them. So we're working on getting answers to that. And as we get answers to it, we will update the FAQ on our website with that information. Also, if leaders and stewards, if you hear anything about this that seems strange to you, send it on right away.
Yeah, and Dave's answer is excellent. I would echo really quickly that, of course, making phone calls during doing contact tracing that's a task of the workplace. And it's the employer's duty to provide the equipment for you to succeed in those tasks in the same way that you have a desk phone or a work cell phone or a laptop, to do your daily work. So that shouldn't change. And please let us know about it if there is a demand to use personal equipment, since that would be, I think, a pretty big disaster pretty quickly.
And somebody named Jolene puts in the chat here that they use a program called Amazon Connect to make the calls off a computer. That seems like the logical thing to do in this circumstance. So that's good. It's good to know. If you don't have internet at home, I suspect you will not be chosen for redeployment. Is probably what it comes down to.
I think we've got most of the questions. I want to invite folks to plug more in there in case I missed some as I'm scrolling through. There was so many. I want to make sure we get them all answered, and we still have a little time on the clock here.
Yeah, some people have asked questions about like when might be, I haven't been notified yet. Will someone, I think this is going to be a rolling thing. People might not hear until a month from now. Oh, you're going to start in January. And so we'll just have to cross that bridge as we come to it. If we have a situation where an employee gets such late notice that it genuinely causes some kind of real impossibility in their lives, well, that's what we're here for, right? That's why stewards are here and my leaders are here and MAPE staff are here. We'll do what we can to help that person. I also think that our attitude as MAPE members should be that we want to pitch in and be helpful to the extent that we can.
There was a couple of questions about other bargaining units, and yes, it's not just MAPE, it's all state employees are being asked to be redeployed. What we know so far is that they have gathered 400 names. That was the target names that they needed. And this first wave is 150 people for contact tracing. So that's what they're prioritizing. And so if you haven't been contacted, it doesn't mean you're not being redeployed. As Dave said, they'll be doing it in waves, and this first wave is 150 folks for contact tracing.
Andrea Falk put a question here about time off. So what we've been told and what the answer is if you already have been approved for time off, it's going to be honored, but new requests for time off will need to be given to whoever is supervising someone in their redeployed position. because they're the people who are going to understand the availability and the need. And somebody named Jay Weinerman asks if they're working out of state, will that have any ability in bearing on our ability to participate? I shouldn't think so because it's telework, but I don't know. There might be exceptions there. If I work a flex schedule currently, will that transfer? I think the most important thing to do if you get notified that you're going to be redeployed is to bring that up right away and make sure everyone understands that. I think broadly speaking, contact tracing work does not all have to be done on a 9 to 5 clock. And so hopefully they'll be able to work with that, but bring it up as soon as possible and let us know. Yes, Lena.
The other thing I wanted to flag is if there's agency specific questions that come up, you can always reach out to your agency based meet and confer teams and they can follow up accordingly as well.
Are people going to be redeployed from direct care positions like the CBHHs or AMRTC or St. Peter? I think it's highly unlikely. I think it's highly unlikely that people are going to be redeployed from the prisons, from the veterans' homes, from the emergency response parts of DPS, from the crime lab at BCA, from direct care and treatment. I think those places that are already kind of fully functioning facilities, that kind of, I think very unlikely that many of those people will be redeployed. I can't promise that, but I think it's just really unlikely because they need you where you are. It'll depend. Nick Snavely asks, will the redeployments be exempt or non-exempt positions? Good question. It'll depend on what they put you into. And so it will be a good question for you to ask when you're redeployed. Is this an exempt or a non-exempt position? And if it's not clear, then contact, of course, you are MAPE stewards, but you should, if you can't, if you or if someone contacts you and you can't get an answer, reach out, we'll sort it out. Mike Terhune asks if these are classified or not. Well, you're not leaving your classified position, you're just being redeployed. So you are still, if you are classified, you remain classified. There is a possibility of unclassified employees being redeployed too, though I suspect they're not going to do as much of that as they can. And you would remain unclassified during that change.
There's a good one there about probation periods. Interesting. I would presume that if you're currently on position probation and you are redeployed, you get past your probation period, you have then passed probation. But this also seems like a scenario where managers and supervisors in giving agencies might request an extension of probation, since that's a tool that that is available under normal circumstances. But again, to be completely fair, we don't know entirely. But that's a very good question. That's definitely something that'll stick with me. Thank you.
Nick Snavely asks, can and will an appointing authority allow state employees to work their normal job during the 40-hour week and also work overtime above and beyond the 40 hours in a redeployed role? Could they? I suppose they could. Will they? I don't think they will. I think for contact tracing especially, they're going to put you over there and you're going to do contact tracing, and that's what you're going to do. They may very well be having people work overtime on contact tracing depending upon the need, though I think part of the reason of having 400 names is that they can have enough bodies not to make overtime out of it. But I think while there are some people who have through this pandemic been partially redeployed, I think if people are brought on for this contact tracing bit, like that's what they're gonna do, and that's what they're gonna do until they're not doing it anymore, and then they'll go back to the regular job, and that might be 3 days, it might be 3 months. Let's hope it's not much longer than that, but I don't think we can. It'd be mere conjecture. So Katie Kinley notes that the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency respectfully declined to participate in redeployment. That's interesting. Melissa Wenzel's politely raised her hand. Melissa, do you want to just speak?
I do, thank you. I'm kind of bouncing in between several things, but I wanted to ask first if MAPE has had a chance to see the COVID-19 response skills survey that is being sent to members that are going to be deployed.
You mean so a survey being sent to people who are being redeployed, like you got one?
Yes, correct.
If you haven't sent it to me, then I haven't seen it.
Right, no, I've already filled it out, so I don't think I can take screenshots any longer. So I don't know if somebody who has received an email hasn't filled it out, if they could send screenshots, because it does ask about what is your normal work schedule? Do you flex? Put the day that you flex. Is there any reason why you can't start on the date that we ask you to? What are your skill sets, and are you, proficient versus, somewhat skilled versus I'd like to learn versus NA? So I wish I had thought to do that, but just getting the email yesterday, I wanted to get that ball rolling. By the way, 15 minutes ago, I just received an email saying, if you're willing, can you start Monday? We could really use the next week for training. So I was given 4.5 business days before my deployment, and now they want to take, well, I have a flex day on Monday, so they want to take my flex day away +2. Obviously, they are actually asking. So it is a voluntary, please consider volunteering. Also, we had one member at the Pollution Control Agency be deployed a week ago. He's been really great to be my redeployment mentor. And he said that he did ask if he could work 5 to 10%, and they pretty much agreed. And he basically figured out awesome, Tim, thank you. He asked if he could work 5 to 10%. I think they agreed to it, and he found out he really couldn't do much in the term of technical work. I'm going to ask for the same thing and ask for just light in between keeping up with work emails within my day job. And I think the last thing I wanted to say is I just wanted to provide a polite correction to your statement, Dave, about people being able to be spared. I think a lot of it is that, but I think it's also skill sets. So I just want to make sure that you stress that in future conversations, that there's a really great and unique skill set plus the ability to have that position vacant for a period of time. So respectfully request you to change your stance on that. I am done.
Outstanding intervention, Melissa. Much appreciated. Highly useful content.
That's great. That's great information, and that's very helpful, I think, to forecasting, some better outcomes on flexibility and work hours and schedules. That again, of course, up until now, we've been sort of in the dark. So thank you, Melissa.
Absolutely. And I'm going to see if there's a way that I can go back into the survey. I think it's actually different than what Tim is posting in self-service. I'm not 100% sure. It's an Office form. So I think it's actually out of self-service. It's a Microsoft form. Oh, I can take screenshots. Yay. Dave, I'll send it to you.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah, it's 6 pages long, by the way. So, but it's just a lot of pull downs and a lot of choose your proficiency level. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Shouldn't surprise us that they're dealing with the same questions we're dealing with here, because I suspect a lot of agencies don't want to give people up, and so they're trying to come up with reasons to not take people too. And so I'm sure everyone's at respecting people's flex schedules and that kind of thing is one of those things they probably are do that. Now, a couple people have asked several times about what you should mark in semaphore about availability. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure that we can properly advise you on how to mark your own status in semaphore.
Dave, I have a thought on that.
Go ahead.
A lot of my coworkers who are expressing surprise that I'm being deployed, a lot of us filled out the semaphore information back in March and early April when we were first requested. And nearly everyone I've talked to thought that meant a physical deployment. And of course, with the virus, people didn't want to be. So people are expressing, oh, well, I didn't volunteer because I have health and safety concerns. And I'm like, well, so do I. And I just assumed it would be telework. And that's what I'm hearing now too. MDH is saying that as well as you. So that seems to be consistent. So just an FYI that there's a lot of people who weren't aware back in March and April of what we're aware of now. So that being said, I think there's some mixed messaging. There's some lack of messaging on the general we now know what you're saying, but a lot of people didn't know in March and still don't know today. Okay, I'm really, really done.
No, good stuff always, Melissa. Somebody asked, we did cover this earlier, but if someone wants to volunteer, it's their own agency that's making the call. So they should go to their supervisor and say, I want to volunteer, and then ask, should they let someone farther up the chain of command know, maybe an HR director or someone, but talk to your immediate supervisor for someone who wants to volunteer. That's what you need to do. And we have, like, one of our colleagues reported that the Department of Education has had 30 people volunteer because they know it's important. And I think, so basically the Department of Education is going to take all volunteers. They're not going to draft anybody for their share of this, which is great.
It is great. In terms of volunteering, just to preview something that's coming later, Governor Walz is going to be sending out a message to state employees to volunteer for long-term care facilities. We don't have much information about that, just to say that the need for staffing there is pretty dire. And so state employees will be asked to volunteer for that. As soon as we have more information, we'll let people know. But that's going to be coming. I'm curious to see how many. I know Melissa said and Andrea said that you've been redeployed. Can you type in the chat if you have been redeployed, and what agency are you currently with? Great. Okay, Brian, it's good to know. Anyone else? Andrea? Oh, Eva, you've been redeployed? Okay. Oh, your coworker. Can you ask, we're trying to know who is being redeployed. Can you email action@mape.org or ask people if you know they've been redeployed to email action@mape.org and let us know, so then we can try to see who of our people are being redeployed. That'd be great.
Yeah, a couple people are saying here, I'm on the list, but I haven't been contacted yet. And again, that's how it's going to roll. Some of you might not be contacted for weeks. I think there are some people who will be on the list who will never be contacted. They're trying to develop a pool of people because they don't know any more than we do how long this thing is going to last. If we're still doing contact tracing in April, you're all going to be called up. But if we're starting to wind it down by January, February, knock on wood, then we fine. I think we're probably getting close to wrapping up here. I will remind you, this has been recorded and it will be put on the whatchamahoosit. And Lena, did you want to make a quick announcement about that thing? It's unrelated, but important.
Yes, and maybe this is previewing the next webinar we may want to do, but we have word from MMB that they are going to be sending an MOU on early retirement incentives our way, which is good news. It'll give our people the option to retire early, the incentive to retire early, and potentially save people's jobs who want to stay in state service. We don't have the MOUs hot off the press. We don't have the MOU yet. I just wanted to announce it to folks. And since there's so many of you here today, and thank you for taking the time to be here, we may use these formats continuously to kind of let stewards and leaders know, share information, and do a deeper dive on the stuff that's coming out.
And some people are already asking questions about it. We haven't seen it yet, so we don't know the answer. But but we probably will do a webinar on it once it's there. So stay tuned.
I'm torn. I see all the questions about early retirement incentive. Talk to your, well, you can talk to this business agent offline about any of your early retirement incentives for sure. Since we've got a decent idea, it's going to be a positive thing for sure. That should be going out to all the agencies.
And to all bargaining units.
Yep.
But again, let's wait till we actually see it before we go to any more detail on. So just possess your souls in patience.
Do we know when it's going to be sent? Have they given you any date?
Like could be within the next 10 minutes, could be the next day.
Yeah, this was just a teaser, the teaser trailer. No questions. Once we have more information, we'll definitely put that out to everyone.
Will this webinar be available on the MAPE webpage?
Yes, we're recording it and it will be available. I don't know. It usually takes like 24 or 48 hours to turn that around for technical reasons I don't understand. But when it's up there, it will go onto the same place where we have our redeployment FAQ, I think.
Thank
I guess
you.
I don't know. Lee is probably gonna make that decision.
Thanks.
Okay. I think that we're starting to wind down. Any closing words from anybody else? Mike, it looks like I might just cut you off. Sorry, go ahead.
I was literally going to say the same thing. I think that we're done. The questions seem to have ended. I think a few of us will stay on here in case folks have individual questions up until 1 o'clock. But thanks everybody for your time, and we'll follow up with the early retirement incentive information as soon as we have something to follow up with.
Thank you all so very much. I wanted to attend for personal reasons just to learn as a union leader, but I had two competing meetings at this time. Well, guess what? This one became much more important, and I'm happy to help others as they go through it as I learn as well. And I'm almost done with the 35 plus questions that it goes really fast. Again, it's actually taking more time to copy and paste the screenshots than it did to actually fill out the survey. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And Dave, do you want to go ahead and end the recording? Because if people stay with individual questions, I don't know that we want that recorded.
Yeah, let me figure out how to do that. Stop recording. Okay, I'm going to press stop recording.